A change of season is the perfect time to change your look. Update your prescription and choose from the wide selection of brand name frames and state-of-the-art lenses at Pearl Vision. They work with all major vision plans, including iMed. Plus, they'll cover the cost of your insurance copay or your eye exam. Schedule your family's eye exams at pearlvision.com. Valid prescription required. Valid at participating locations. Restrictions apply. Taxes extra. See store for details. Ends 7/31/23. Exams available at the independent doctor of optometry at or next to Pearl Vision. Some doctors employed by Pearl Vision.
Welcome to Meeting Malkmus, a Pavement Podcast. Hey, it's JD here, back for another episode of the Meeting Malkmus Podcast. We have completed the task at hand and met Malkmus, but we're still ticking along here whenever we've got some news to pass by your way or an update of some sort, like the pod list, for example. Get your songs in, folks. I've heard precious little from you. Would love to be able to put out a pod list for my birthday again this year, but so far I've heard nada. So there's that. This episode is coming your way because I was really fortunate. I reached out to the social media person for the Gary Young documentary, Louder Than You Think, and they got back to me, and I was able to sit down with Brian Thalkin, one of the producers, was in Fall of Christianity with Gary, and the director, Jed Rosenberg. So I had a really good time sitting and meeting with them. Perhaps I was a little too high. You can be the judge of that. But I think we had a great 45-minute discussion about the film. I got a chance to watch it. It's really quite good, and you should watch it as well when it comes out. I can't wait for it to come out at the theater and to see it in a theater. It should be just wonderful. So there's that. That's what I've got for you this week. It's an interview, like I said, with Jed and Brian on Louder Than You Think, the Gary Young documentary. Before we get into that, let's listen to a track. Let's listen to something that Gary would have had some influence on. Let's listen to Angel Carver Blues Mellow Jazz Docent on Meeting Malkmus, a Pavement Podcast. All right. I am sitting here today with director Jed I. Rosenberg and producer Brian Thalkin. Did I say that right, Brian?
You did. That's great.
Oh, excellent. That's the thing I worry about the most. But hey, there we are. We nailed it. So there's that. I'm really pleased to have watched the film and got to see what you guys put together and what you got.
So JD, as a super fan, did you like some of the new footage that you must not have seen before? Because some of this stuff was like from the archives of deep in the.
Yes. That part of it was super cool.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff, even like with the Scott at this party, kind of talking about Gary and like just kind of like home video stuff that just Scott was. We were really fortunate that he found this stuff and was able to provide it and trusted us with it. And so there's even like a quick shot of behind the camera. I think it's Bob who's saying to Mark, "Hey, have you met Steve West?" And like it's like literally like them.
Oh wow!
Being there for the first. If you rewatch it, you can kind of catch that. It happens very quickly, but yeah, these moments that we're excited because I know that the fans will appreciate seeing some of this stuff and getting a little bit of a peek, behind the curtain that I think has never been seen. So yeah.
Very cool. So the film was released at South by Southwest. I'm curious what the feedback has been like so far in terms of folks that have taken in your project.
Yeah, I think that, honestly, it's been all very positive. Lots of, and I think that there's something for everybody. I think that if you don't know much about the band, I think there's still something there to latch onto. I think we have these puppet sequences that people really have responded to positively, and
very cool.
I think that's really propelled things, pretty significantly for our audiences who can just sort of like be mesmerized by this marionette artistry that we were able to include. And I think it's just it's a character piece. It's about this guy, Gary. The band Pavement happens to be part of his story, and that's important. But for us, it's about telling Gary's story specifically and telling this era through his lens, through his perspective, which I don't think we get a lot from the sort of the historical tellings of the band. I think that he plays a really big part, but we don't really know that much about him. And the hope is that we can really explore him as a person and see what makes him tick and understand the serendipity of his placement in the band and the way that he helps inspire the other guys. They inspired him, and a lot of this really important music that was the genesis of the band and how they exploded and blew up. This was Gary was very much instrumental in that. And of course, he has his demons and he has his issues. And so those things ended up sort of undoing a lot of the momentum that he had. And so there's this kind of like push and pull, I think, within him of, being an entertainer and being someone who loves being in the spotlight and someone who is self-destructive and can't help but be his own worst enemy in a lot of ways. So it's a complicated character piece. And I think that hopefully is something that will and does allow an audience, regardless of your knowledge of Pavement, to be excited by the film. And thus far it's been really good. Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that that's pretty comprehensive and covers it. But yeah.
Well, Brian, I wanted to talk about the genesis of the project as a whole.
Sure.
I'm wondering what you could tell us about that.
Well, my producing partner Jeff Clark and myself, we've been friends with Gary for over 40 years. I first met Gary back in 1979 when he joined, or we joined a band together called The Fall of Christianity. And so we've been friends with Gary for a very long time, and we just thought that his story was very unique. He's kind of the last person that we ever thought would become a successful musician, from our group of friends when we were starting out in bands and that. Just because he was a bit of an oddball, we were all we wanted to play punk rock, and Gary came from a totally different background. He was very willing to play punk rock with us, but he didn't dress like a typical punk rocker, or, he didn't have the musical knowledge of that genre. His favorite bands were Yes and, Procol Harum and things like that. So he came from a totally different world than we did. So, and we thought that his story was just so unique that we wanted to get it out, to a wider audience. And Jeff and our good friend David Nicholson, who's the cinematographer on the film, they actually started a documentary back in 2007, or they attempted to. They went and spent a couple of days filming Gary, but for some reason it never got off the ground then. And so it was back in about 2018, 2019, just pre-COVID. I had produced another short independent film, and I approached Jeff with, resurrecting this project. So we started in 2019 and brought Jed on board with us, and David Nicholson, and got started on it. But pretty much as soon as we got started is when COVID hit, and that kind of threw a spanner into the works, and just it made it difficult. I'm located in Vancouver, Canada, so I couldn't cross the border to go to any interviews and that. And Jed and David, fortunately, were on the right side of the border and were able to do that. So that's kind of the background on it.
Wow. Well, once you got to the point of resurrecting, how difficult or easy was it to get Gary on board?
It was very easy to get Gary on board. Gary's motto is "any publicity is good publicity," and he was very keen, to be part of this, and and the other Pavement guys as well. I've known Steve Malkmus just about as long as I've known Gary. Not quite as well, I guess. But we started out playing in the same punk rock scene together. And Scott Canberg as well. I stayed in touch more with Scott back in 2010 when Pavement did their reunion tour. They graciously invited another of my punk rock bands called The Authorities to open up for them when they played in our hometown of Stockton. And they also brought us over to England with them to play the All Tomorrow's Parties Festival. So, we've been in touch with those guys, and they've been on board with the project the whole time. Scott, more than anyone, has been a major help, and just helping us anytime we hit a roadblock. He would come in and clear it for us.
I would also add that the Authorities, this band that Brian was in, is a really important part of the Pavement story in a lot of ways, because these guys were kids and they looked up like the Authorities were a significant group in Stockton, in this punk scene. They were really big. And if you read like early interviews with the guys in, little fanzines and things, they talk about the Authorities as being a band that they really, looked up to and appreciated, and had a lot of, high regards for them. And so I think it's pretty cool that, Brian has that position, and was able to sort of, I mean, we have footage of Malkmus when he was in the Straw Dogs, like a very short clip. I don't know if you were able to see that.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So it's like that stuff. No one has seen that before, but it's like it kind of gives you a sense of what that scene was. I mean, it was small and tight, and I'm just speaking not from my own experience, but just from what I'm hearing from Brian and Jeff and Gary and everybody else. Like, everybody knew each other, and that includes these guys that would become this enormous indie rock band.
Eyes in the socket, so I'm gonna sock it. Ba 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 da ba, free slide. Ba 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 da ba, free slide. Ba 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 da ba, free slide. Ba 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 da ba, free slide.
What is your personal history with the band?
Well, my personal history, it all relates back to Gary. I knew Gary much better than I knew Scott or Steve. Scott worked at a record store that was managed by my brother, and Steve was in, as Jed mentioned, he was in a band called the Straw Dogs that we played with many, many times. But for me personally, it's more to do with Gary. I met Gary when I was 17 and he was 26, and he was kind of a musical mentor in a sense for me. He turned me on to a lot of stuff that I otherwise wouldn't have known about.
I bet. I can't even imagine having access to someone like Gary Young.
Well, no one knew, where Gary was headed back in those days. Honestly, he was just kind of this older, at 26, we thought he was this washed up hippie. But looking back on it now, he was just a kid as well. So,
Chad, anything in your recent or way past history in terms of Pavement?
Yeah, I mean, I'm disconnected with, as far as like a personal connection, but I certainly listened to them in high school and college. And I remember being in college, I was in New York, and a lot of people that I would meet and become friends with, and we would talk about bands and different artists. The people who were really into like indie music and things that were not mainstream always loved Pavement. And in my head, it became this association where indie rock sort of meant Pavement. Like, I would literally hear the genre indie rock. Someone would be like, "Oh, I like indie rock." In my head, immediately, it was Pavement. And almost every time I would say, "Oh, do you like Pavement?" Of course, like that's a top group for them, right? And so it was like this funny thing where they represented something larger than the music that they made. And that was always how I viewed them and thought of them, because of that, personal association I had. So I got a call from David Nicholson, who we mentioned is the DP or the cinematographer of the project. He and I've made a lot of stuff together, and, we're good friends. And he was like, "Hey, do you know the band Pavement?" And I was like, "Of course." And he was like, "How do you feel about like maybe coming on to be the director for this project about the original drummer?" And I was like, I don't really know anything about the original drummer, but I, certainly know a lot about Pavement, as far as like how important they are and the influence and everything. What's kind of funny, and I wonder if you come across this, JD, with your, in your circles, but when I signed on to do the project, I was like, oh man, everyone's going to like hear that I'm doing this, and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, Pavement. And I started telling people, yeah, I'm working on this project with this band Pavement. And just like most people would be like, I don't know who that is. Like most people that I would come across would be like, oh, okay, cool. And what I realized is that it is more niche than I in my head thought, and I think that, but then like I went to a party and it was like all these people from college, and every single person knew Pavement and was very excited and like was like wanted to talk my ear off about the band and the project and this and that. So it's like this funny thing where if you know about the band, you love them, and it's like this cult status. And if you don't, it's just not part of, your radar, and that's okay. But it's just kind of funny how I learned a little bit more about that as the project developed, from a personal perspective.
Yes, you have to hit the right demo, I suppose, at this point, but if you hit that sweet spot, boy, oh boy, do they go back to the gold sounds. What's it like working, and either of you guys can answer this question, like I hope you both will, but what's it like working with Gary Young? Like, what's that like?
Well, I'll start off here. And, when I first worked with Gary in a band, The Fall of Christianity, we ended up kicking Gary out of the band. and a lot of the reasons that he left the band were the same reasons that made him very popular in Pavement. He couldn't ever remember what song was coming up next. He would get up in the middle of a song and do a headstand. When he was supposed to be drumming, he would be at the bar. I think the bar was a little more accessible back then because we didn't have quite the number of people in the audience that he had with Pavement. But it's also been great working with Gary because he is such a dear friend, being able to spend time with him. And, he's a keener. He'll do whatever we ask him to do. And so it's been, I in a lot of ways, it's very easy to work with Gary. But again, he has his challenges. And so you have to kind of work around those. Jed, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's no secret that Gary drinks and he can get really drunk. And sometimes that ends up impeding some of the plans to film with him because you want him to talk about X, Y, and Z, and he's just not really there. And so that kind of would happen, but then, you just film anyway and you just see what you get. And a lot of times that stuff was even more powerful than what we were planning on getting because it's just real and raw, and what you see is what you get. And he never tries to front for the camera or like put up a facade or fake anything. I mean, he really is just completely vulnerable. He's open, and that's a really tough thing to beat. Like when you find a character who is that willing to put himself out there and to just be that raw character that you're hoping to depict, because a lot of times the camera comes out and suddenly people get a little shy or protective, and he was willing to talk about anything and be who he is. And I mean, that's kind of a dream, so there were difficulties in some aspects, but I mean, he was a special person to be around in film. And also he's a real ham. And so like, even if we were like not ready to film with him quite yet, he would start to like, do things just for the camera. He would just start singing a song, or he would just, make noises and be a goof. And it's great. I mean, that's what you want if you're like following a character around, and they can be free to be who they are. And he loved it. I mean, he really loved being on camera, and that's kind of one of the through lines in this film, is that he really likes attention. He really always wanted to be a star. He wanted to be the center. And so it's funny because like when we screened the film for friends and family, it wasn't even finished yet, but we screened it. And I remember talking to Gary before we sat down to watch it. And I said, hey, you know, how do you feel? And he said, he kind of like, you know, there was like almost like a tear in his eye. And he said, you guys made a documentary about me. Like, what more could somebody ask for in this life? You know, and that really affected me too, because it was sort of like,
I bet.
Yeah, I felt like really like we were able to do something that, he deserved to have this, and he deserves to be, to have a film, you know, and I think that the fact that he was so grateful, and he, you know, since then he's even said multiple times about how, like, you know, he's so grateful that we would do this for him, and like, we're grateful that you would do this for us. Like, it's not a one-way street. Like, we all really are appreciative of the opportunity to make something together. It's a collaboration, and so yeah, I think you know, he's a wonderful guy, and as you can tell, like it was really special for all of us to get together and do this together.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a really beautiful, special way to tell the story of this really important band that a lot of people don't know about, through this character that you couldn't write. You couldn't write if you hired the best writers out there. You couldn't, you know, like, he's an amalgam of a bunch of different archetypes, but he's like beautiful through and through at the same point.
You know what's funny, JD, is that for me, it was actually, I was more worried about like my film friends and the documentary friends and critics and things in that regard, because I wanted to just make a really good documentary. You know, I didn't, it didn't, but because for me, I would look at the footage and I would, you know, I'm like neurotic and just always like trying to make things as good as possible and worrying about how it could be better and better and better. So of course I'm like in my own head a lot, just wondering like, oh, are people going to like this? But the one thing that I kind of kept returning to that would ground me was, I know the fans are going to like this, you know, and if that happens, at the very least, we will have accomplished something really important, because we want to service the fans too, you know. And I know that just by the nature of seeing some of this footage and hearing some of these stories and getting some of these fresh perspectives, I really think the fans are going to be very happy, you know. And so that actually was rather than feeling the pressure of trying to, you know, service them in that way, it was actually the thing that made me, like, helped me keep going, because I knew I was excited to get the fans to see the film. I knew that they were going to like, I mean, there's like puppet sequences, marionettes of the band and stuff. Like, how could you be a fan and not just kind of freak out when you see this stuff? So it's kind of like this opposite thing, but, you know, maybe Brian has a different perspective.
No, not really. It's I was always very curious, you know. This is the first documentary film that I've worked on, and so I was just curious myself, like, how the story was going to unfold, because I didn't have it in my mind. But, you know, Jed did an amazing job of bringing, you know, the character of Gary out, and I think with all of our other interviewees, Jed did a great job too, just making them relaxed and enabling them to, you know, tell their side of the story about Gary. And it all comes out very genuine and loving, you know. So, and then Jed edited the film along with a fellow named Greg King. And I think together that they both did again, just an amazing job of putting the story together in a very, cohesive and coherent way that it unfolds, and you get a true sense of who Gary really is.
Lies and betrayals, fruit-covered nails, electricity and lust won't break the door. I've got a heavy coat, it's filled with rocks and sand, and if I lose it, I'll be coming back today. I'll be coming back today. I keep it in my head. I'm coming back one day. I've got a system. I'll be coming back today. Ex-magician, he still knows the tricks. Tricks are everything to me until it's free. I've got a trigger cut and I can't pull it back. But if I learn how, I'll be coming back today. I'm coming back today. You will look at me and say, "But you just wish I went away." I learned the truth of the words. Truth I made for you because it's just as good. And if I spit it out before I chew the ring, I'll rearrange it till it looks just right today. And I'll be coming back my way. You will look at me and say, "But you just wish I went away today."
I walked away from the movie feeling like, I did quite a bit of research early on with the podcast, and there's very little out there, about the early years. So to see this and participate in this and experience this, I walked away feeling like I had a better sense of this band's history. And
Well, JD, honestly, I learned so much. I've known a lot of these guys in the film for 40 years, and I learned so much from the interviews that Jed did with everyone. So I have a much clearer picture in my mind what Pavement is all about.
If you're listening to this, pay attention to your local listings. And is there a time that it'll go? How does this work? You do festivals for like a year, or do you do that for as long as you can? Or
I think the typical festival circuit could take maybe about a year or so. We are getting a lot of interest in the film. We debuted at South by Southwest. In our category, we won the Audience Choice Award.
Wow.
So we're getting a lot of attention. Thank you. Yeah, we're getting a lot of attention from festivals all around the world. We've hired an agent to handle the festival and distribution, possible sales side of this for us. So he's working very hard and diligently on that. But the hope is to get it out into the festival circuit, possibly some screenings in various markets, and then eventually, hopefully, getting it onto some sort of streaming platform where everyone can see it.
Yeah, everybody needs to see it for sure. I want to know a little bit more about the choice that you made with the marionettes and the various puppet sequences in the film. Was that something that, like, how does something like that get born?
Well, first of all, I'll say the marionette sequences, they were directed by a woman by the name of Adrienne Rose Leonard at Little Wonder Productions, and Adrienne did an amazing job, absolutely amazing. So, my hat's off to her. When we first started on this film, my producing partner, Jeff Clark, had said to me that he had an idea of reenacting some of the scenes using marionettes. And I have to be honest with you, like, I couldn't picture in my mind how that was going to work. My background is in video game development, and so I'm more, on the CGI side and computer-generated art and that, and that's kind of what I had in mind, is maybe doing something like that. But I'm really glad that we did go with the marionettes, because I think it is something that it's a bit surreal, those scenes, and I think that they ended up really working. One of the reasons that we wanted to do something like that is we just didn't want to have nothing but a bunch of middle-aged white dudes on the screen talking about the band. So to keep it interesting, we decided to go with the marionettes, and I think it really works.
Very cool. Yeah, I would say it took me by surprise initially, but as the film moved on and there's more of it, it's like it is this clever way to sort of break the format or the modality, I suppose, the way you're telling the tale. Yeah, kudos. It's really a lot of fun. Surprising moments. Were there any, when you make a film of this? Well, I guess I can reframe this question. How in the hell did you guys deal with COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, luckily we shot a bunch of stuff before everything went down. And then, it gave us some time to work on the edit and kind of take our time a little bit and massage things and try things. But then, we had challenges, of course, because we still had some interviews we needed to get. And, at that time, it's like no one knew how long this was going to be, what's the new normal. And so we had to get some Zoom interviews happening, which, it is what it is. We just had to go for it and do it. So that was, a challenge for sure. And actually, there were a few Zoom interviews that we ended up refilming because we knew that we could. We had access to the people that were doing it. Like Kelly, who you see in the film, is Gary's good friend who's in hospital later on. We did a Zoom interview initially. And I'm glad we reshot that because it's like doing something over Zoom. You can only be so intimate with the subject. Sure. We did an interview and it was great. It was, he's wonderful to hear his stories and things. But once we were in person with him, it was a whole other thing because he cries at the end of his interview and stuff. you don't really get that over Zoom. You know what I mean? And so having that kind of barrier was a challenge to try to make sure that these interviews, that, there's only a couple of them, but the interviews that we got over Zoom, hopefully like these are going to work because this is what we got, and I think they did. I think everything worked out. But yeah, it was something that we definitely had to, take some consideration in the approach to these things. And then also like,
it's not distracting at all. Like
good.
There's nothing about the film that says COVID to me at all. So there is like a nice mix again of, IRL and Zoom and,
cool.
various other,
and we kind of tried to justify it by saying like, they're a lo-fi band, and we can throw in different elements, and we can have things that are high res and low res, and marionettes and this and that, and it can all just work together because that's very punk rock or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, we just wanted to make a good film, and I think we made it work, and we're all very happy with that. But yeah, to answer your question, of course, like it's a difficult thing when you're dealing with that. But we lucked out in certain circumstances, and then I think we just made do in others.
Was it ever in jeopardy at all? Through COVID?
I don't think so. I think that we are going to make this thing, regardless of circumstances, because I think we had enough in the can before COVID that we had something special, and we were working on the edit, of course. And I think that, the feedback within our team was extremely positive. Everybody's very, very excited about this. So I don't think there was any single thought of like, oh, we're not going to finish this. Like, we are going to finish this,
Right.
We it was going to happen. But yeah, of course we were delayed. Of course it slowed things down. But
stressful. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Was there ever a thought of putting the three of them in the same shot in the same room? Spiral, SM, and Gary?
Logistically, I think that would have been really difficult because they're all sort of located in different places. I mean, as you may know, like Spiral, he lived in Australia for a bit, and he's kind of lived in different places. Steven lives, in the Pacific Northwest, and Gary is not very mobile, and he's in Stockton. So like to get them all together would have been challenging, and I don't think we needed to do that. I think it was okay. I mean, at the end we have like the puppet versions of them together, and I think that's kind of a cool way to, make that part of work.
Slash the beds and when it looks like a wife's ex-supply, we'll cover all the rugs with cheap perfume. She's got the radioactive and it makes me feel okay. I don't feel okay. She's got the radioactive and it makes me feel okay. I don't feel okay.
did you catch that that's a new Pavement song technically at the end there?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like what the hell?
So I'll tell you the story of that. So basically, we were filming with Gary, and like, you know, one of the things that I was really worried about was like, I don't want people to walk away thinking, oh, Gary, like, what a sad story, what a sad sack, you know, because I think that in a lot of ways, Gary did the things he set out to accomplish. You know, I think he really did get to live this rock star life, and he wasn't supposed to. Like like Brian said, he was not. No one in a million years thought he was going to do this. You know, and my whole like line that I use is that, you know, he flew too close to the sun, but at least he flew. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like the spirit that I wanted people to walk away understanding about Gary. And so I was with him filming, and I said, Gary, do you want the film to have a happy ending or a sad ending? Knowing that he's going to want it to have a happy ending. He really he does exude this joy, and he really does want people to experience that too. And so he just like impromptu just starts saying like, we want everybody to be happy. And he just starts singing this song that he's making up, mostly making it up on the spot. And in my head, I was like, okay, well, we're going to end with this, obviously. And then when we were in the edit, you know, actually it was Brian's idea to have the other puppets come through. And so we had Scott work on a musical component of this that is part of the bed of that song, the musical bed of that song. And then like we have some Malkmus guitar that we kind of sampled from a live show in there. So it ends up becoming this like actual collaboration of sorts of those three guys. And we said to Scott and Steven, like, hey, like, what do you think of like calling like, can we call this a Pavement song? Is that? And they were like, yeah, this is a Pavement song. So like in this weird way, they made a new Pavement song, you know, and it's silly and goofy. Who said it was like the Yellow Submarine or like the Octopus's Guard? Somebody like made a funny reference like to like
that was probably Jeff.
Okay, yeah, like it was like the silly, you know, Beatles song. Aside from like the rest of their catalog, this was like the goofy one that you know, was written by Ringo or something, you know. But it's still a Beatles song, you know. That's how I see it, and it's kind of like an Easter egg at the end, because if you blink, you'll miss that it says this like name of the song by Pavement.
Right.
3 or whatever.
Yeah, it's very clever.
So that's, again, it's like what I was getting back to before, where I'm like, I know the fans are going to like this. Like, if you're a fan of the band and there's a brand new song, even if it's a silly song, like, how are you not going to at least like appreciate that, right? So again, like that really helped fuel all of my own neuroses around everything. I was just like, you know what? I know the fans are going to like this. They have to like this. So that was another one where I was like, this will work.
Well, I'm a pretty big fan, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. You're very right about the ending. It happened to me unconsciously, though, like subconsciously, I suppose, rather than unconsciously. That song shifts a gear, like it really does shift a gear, and it takes you from, you know, contemplating this, potentially contemplating, oh, this poor old man, you know, to that image that you have in your image library of Gary standing outside and the sun in the background, you know, and it's so optimistic. It's such a great photograph. I'm guessing it's from, you know, it's a frame from the film. Yeah. But it looks gorgeous. And I just think that, I just think that, it's a real beautiful tribute to Gary that you've assembled.
Thank you, JD. That obviously means a lot to us because, you know, we know how much this world, how important it is. And so if you liked it, then we did our job. So thank you.
If anything, what did you learn in your time with Gary Young? You know, something that you could take away rather than something you learned about him necessarily. Did you get any pearls of wisdom?
That's really hard. So there was a time when we're talking about this like Japanese magazine that after he left Pavement, this magazine in Japan asked him to do like this Dear Abby advice column.
Yeah, that was so bizarre.
Very bizarre. And so, you know, we're talking about this, and this didn't make it into the film, but I said, Gary, do you have any advice for us about making the film? And he said, be honest, tell the truth. Don't like, you know, make shit up or whatever. Don't be dishonest about it. And there were times in the edit where like I'm looking at this footage of shooting Gary where he's like really drunk, and it's really sad in some parts of the film, and I'm like, is this okay, like, to depict this man like this, you know? And I literally kept thinking back to him saying that, like, just be honest. And so every time I was faced with a question of how should we be portraying this person, I think that like his instinct was correct. Like, and he kind of gave us permission in that way to sort of say, hey, this is the reality. Like, that is okay. Like, that's part of the way that you should be telling the story, you know? And I think that was a real blessing to have in my head for the film in the edit, because like I said, there are times when you start to wonder about the ethics of things and so forth.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. But, you know, he was like he gave us permission in that sense, even just with a very quick response to the question that, yeah, was actually important for us in putting this together.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, because I can't imagine the feeling being in an editing room and seeing something that can move a story or create a story and having to choose whether or not to, you know, use that footage.
Right.
Yeah, it's a tough gig. You guys made it look easy. It does match the Pavement aesthetic. It looks, you know, it's got a lo-fi look. It feels really great. Brian, you've known Gary for a long time. What has been your biggest takeaway or learn from?
Well, I'm just grateful that this allowed me to spend more time with Gary. You know, I left Stockton back in 1983 to go to school in San Francisco, and then right out of university, I ended up getting a job up here in Vancouver and moved away, and so I didn't really get to spend much time with Gary. We'd talk on the phone occasionally, but you know, this project allowed me to go back and spend time with Gary and his wonderful wife Jerry, and you know, and just hang out with my old friend again. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, how cool is that? And then you got to make a movie about him.
It's been a pleasure, really. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking time to talk to this old fool. This has been really great. I really appreciate the opportunity to see the film. I will definitely see it in a theater setting. I think the soundtrack alone with the right theater, it's going to sound great. You know, it's going to look great. So I want to see it in that setting as well. But I'm really pleased again that you took some time to talk to me today about this really interesting, fascinating movie that you've made, Louder Than You Think, about the fantastic Gary Young.
Thanks for having us, JD. It's really a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you very much.
I saw your girlfriend and she's eating her fingers like they're just another meal, but she waits there in the levee while she's mixing cocktails with a plastic tip cigar. Shiny roads where on the protein delta strip in an abandoned houseboat I will wait there. I'll be waiting forever. I'm waiting, 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 waiting. Go! Deposit daily, drop off the first shiny robe. I've got a lot of things I want to sell, but not here, babe. Talk
Oh boy, did I almost step on that. You know, when a song is ending, you gotta wait for it to end. This isn't fucking AM radio. You know, you wait for it to end. And I expect most people listen to this on headphones. I don't know that to be true, but I suspect that to be the case, so they can hear the music outros. At any rate, I want to thank Jed and Brian for stopping by. That was a really great conversation. Again, maybe a little too high. I hope not. It seems like, we got to where we needed to go. And that's that everybody needs to go see this movie. If you're tangentially related to Pavement or have, a tangential, response to the band, you got to do it. Slanted and Enchanted turns 31 tomorrow. Today is Wednesday. Tomorrow is Thursday the 20th. Slanted and Enchanted is 31 years old. Holy shit. Other than that, Podless, come on. You going to do this or what? Talk to me. JD at meetingmalkmus.com. Would love to hear from you and let me know that there is a song coming my way. We'll see. That's what I got for you. So stay cool and be well and wash your goddamn hands.
Meeting Malkmus is a weekly affair and is a production of Dover Podcasts and such. Rate, review, share, and sponsor at meetingmalkmus.com. Connect with JD at meetingmalkmus.com. And hey, I'm social. Follow me everywhere at Meeting Malkmus. Dover Podcasts and such.
Progressive presents an ad from Mom.
When you bundle your home and auto insurance with Progressive, bundle, that's a cute word. What? Read it again? Okay. When you bundle your home and auto insurance with Progressive, you get round-the-clock protection. Oh, that's darn good. Because once my older sister Dottie, her basement flooded.
Get round-the-clock protection when you bundle and save with Progressive. It's easier than getting your mom to make this radio ad. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discount not available in all states or situations.